My name is Margaret Harrison, 58 years old, and I want to begin with the moment my sister, the woman who had erased my name from our father's will just hours earlier, realized her life rested in the hands of the failure she had spent 58 years despising. Her voice cut through the cabin chaos like a blade through silk. "She's not even a real pilot!" Catherine's shriek drowned out the crying children and the wailing alarms. "She's just a toy soldier. Do you people know she has PTSD? She's unstable." I sat in 14B, heard every syllable. Someone's phone camera blinked red in the dim emergency lighting. I knew because I saw the glow, but I said nothing because silence is not absence. Silence is choice. Silence is strength dressed in satin. I stood, unbuckled with deliberate slowness, straightened my navy dress uniform, the retired colonel's blues Catherine had mocked at the Lisbon airport just 6 hours ago. "You still need to wear that costume. You're 58, Maggie, not 28. I walked past her row, Catherine still talking, still shouting. I did not look at her. I simply moved toward the cockpit, and in the 12 minutes that followed, I landed a Boeing 777 with a dead engine, an unconscious captain, failed hydraulics, and 300 souls aboard, including my venomous sister. After the wheels touched earth and everyone lived, Catherine stayed silent for 5 full minutes. Then she walked off that plane, pulled out her phone, and started dialing her attorney, not to thank me, to sue me. This is the story of how a 58-year-old woman dismissed as an afterthought saved the very people who scorned her, and then did something far more important: reclaim $47 million of inheritance her sister had stolen, built a legacy for thousands of women, and taught her family what respect actually means. 3 days earlier, Intercontinental Lisbon, Portugal. I had flown overnight from Arizona, where I settled after retiring, to make my father's funeral. 18 hours in the air, 3 connections. When I stepped into the hotel conference room, Catherine did not even glance up. She sat there in an $8,000 Chanel suit. I knew the price because she had bragged about it over the phone last month. Her platinum hair sculpted into perfect waves. On her wrist, a $45,000 Patek Philippe, gift from her late husband. Margaret. She used my full name, voice flat as old champagne. Eyes stayed locked on her iPad. "Didn't expect you to make it. Thought you were busy in the desert or wherever." I did not answer. I took the last empty chair at the table, the only seat without a nameplate, and set my bag down. That was when I understood. I was the only person in the room without an assigned place. My name appeared on no placards, as if I were not family, as if I were a last-minute guest. Catherine was not hosting a funeral. She was running a board meeting. The attorney began reading the will. His voice droned, mechanical, like he was reciting a property deed. The Harrison Family Trust, valued at approximately $47 million, consisting of Manhattan real estate, $18 million penthouse, stock portfolio at $22 million, and Hamptons vacation properties totaling $7 million. I sat straighter. $47 million. I had no idea Father accumulated that much. Will be managed by Catherine Harrison Blackwell as sole executor. Mrs. Blackwell will have full discretionary authority over all financial, legal, and distribution matters. The attorney paused, looked at me. Mrs. Margaret Harrison will receive a personal envelope from her father and sincere thanks for her service to the country. Service to the country, as if 35 years in the Air Force were a part-time job. The envelope was handed over. Inside, a Korean War commemorative coin, a photo of Father beside an F-86 Sabre in 1953, and a small handwritten note in blue ink. "Maggie, you are the strongest of us. You will understand why. Don't let anyone tell you that you are unworthy. Dad." I folded the note, slipped it into my vest pocket, let no one see my hands shake. No house, no shares, no savings, not even Mother's wedding ring, the one Father promised would come to me when she passed. Catherine closed her iPad with a sharp click. "All right then, that's settled. Our flight is 6 p.m. Maggie, are you planning to wear That on the plane? She gestured at my retired uniform as if it were a Halloween costume. This is my uniform. Of course. Sophie, Catherine's 23-year-old daughter, giggled from the corner. And I bet it comes with a please respect me badge, right, Aunt Maggie? Catherine did not stop her daughter. She only smiled, that small, cold smile I had seen for 58 years. The smile that said, "You have always been the loser, Maggie. You always will be." Lisbon Airport check-in counter. Catherine booked business class for all three of us, herself, Sophie, me. "We have to fly together," she explained to the gate agent. Family funeral. Would look strange otherwise. Always about appearances. Always about how things looked from outside. We boarded. Skybridge 30072 to Denver. Stopover in the Azores. Catherine took the window. Sophie took the middle. I got the aisle. 3 women, 3 generations, but only one had ever saved anyone's life. The plane lifted. Catherine ordered champagne. Sophie pulled out her phone and started snapping selfies, did not even bother hiding that we had just come from a funeral. "Maggie," Catherine sipped her $85 Veuve Clicquot, "do you know what Father actually wanted for you?" I said nothing. "He wanted you to grow up, leave the military phase behind and come home, find a decent man, settle down, live like a normal person." I was married. My husband died 3 years ago. Cancer. Catherine waved her hand as if shooing a fly. "Right, that pilot, poor thing. But you still have time. 58 isn't the end of the road. You could meet someone if you tried." I looked out the window. Not because I was angry, because if I looked at her face, I might say something I could never take back. That was when Sophie spoke up. "Mom, does Aunt Maggie know about the mental health clause?" Time stopped. Catherine turned to her daughter with warning eyes, but Sophie, raised on arrogance and no filter, kept going. "Oh, come on, you told me about it. The clause in the will that excludes people with unresolved mental health records. Aunt Maggie had PTSD after Iraq, right? 3 months mandatory leave?" I turned to Catherine. "Not Sophie, Catherine." She took a sip of champagne, avoided my eyes. But I saw it, the slight flush in her cheeks, the way she gripped the glass just a fraction tighter. "You dug into my military records." Not a question, a fact. I shared relevant medical information with the estate attorney. Catherine still would not look at me. To protect the family's interests, that is my responsibility as executor. You used the worst moment of my life to steal Father's legacy. I did not steal anything. Catherine finally met my gaze, eyes cold as January. "I protected it. You are unstable, Maggie. You always have been. Father knew that. He was just too kind to say it out loud." That was a lie. I knew immediately. Father never thought I was unstable. He was proud of me. He told me every time we spoke, but those calls had stopped about a year before he died. Catherine told me he was too tired to talk, that doctors advised limiting visitors, that I should give him space. Now I understood. Catherine had isolated him, cut me out, then changed the will while he was weak and alone. You know what's funny? My voice stayed level enough that Sophie stopped taking pictures. I flew 18 hours to get here, not for money, not for inheritance, because I loved him, and you took away my chance to say goodbye because you wanted control. Catherine set down her champagne. You are always so dramatic, and you are always cruel. Silence, the tension between us thick enough to slice with a blade. Then the cabin lights flickered, once, twice, and everything began falling apart. The first jolt was minor. Catherine spilled champagne on her $3,200 Hermes dress. She jabbed the call button with the irritation of someone used to being served. The flight attendant came quickly, polite but clearly busy. "We're hitting a bit of chop, ma'am. Would you like a towel?" Catherine did not answer right away. She looked at the woman with a tight smile, then gestured at the stain as if expecting someone to produce a dry cleaner mid-flight. "Whatever you have, and maybe less bouncing next time?" The attendant handed over a napkin and moved on. I would have applauded if I were not worried Catherine would take it personally. Then the smell came, burnt plastic, faint at first, just enough to make you wonder if it was in your head. But I knew that smell. 35 years in cockpits trained me to spot it. This was not normal turbulence. The engines whined, then dipped, then recalibrated. Not right. A sharp bang echoed from the tail section, followed by what sounded like a mechanical hiccup. Passengers gasped. The cabin lights dimmed again. This time they did not come back on immediately. I leaned forward, trying to see toward the cockpit. No movement, no announcements, nothing. Catherine wrinkled her nose. Budget airline pilots, probably ex-military like you. Think combat hours equal passenger flights. It's all just theater. I turned to her. Do you ever stop? Stop what? Talking down to people who actually do something real. She narrowed her eyes. You think flying jets makes you better than me? I think you never got over the fact that I never needed your approval. Her lips tightened, but she did not respond. Probably the first moment of silence from her since the gate. Another jolt, harder this time. The plane tilted slightly left, not a normal bank, a correction. Then I heard something I had not expected, a choked cough through the intercom. Then silence. Then emergency lighting kicked on, and in that half-second power flicker, I saw Catherine's expression change. The arrogance drained. The confidence crumbled. She looked, like everyone else, terrified, and I was already unbuckling my seatbelt. A sudden jolt threw coffee cups from tray tables. The entire cabin lurched downward, and for a moment gravity felt personal. Shouts and gasps mixed into low chaos. Oxygen masks dropped, hissing. The man in the Denver Nuggets hoodie 2 rows ahead gripped his daughter's hand until his knuckles went white. The girl was crying quietly into a travel pillow. The flight attendant grabbed the intercom microphone. Her practice calm evaporated. Mayday, mayday, engine to fire, crew to cockpit. Her voice cracked on the last word. Catherine's eyes went wide. That doesn't sound minor. On the overhead panel, ECAM lights flickered red. I recognized the codes. Fire in 2. Overhead, hydraulic fail. None of it was good. By the time I processed what they meant, the plane tilted again, hard. A sharp explosion echoed from the right wing. A whoosh of hot air flooded through cabin vents, carrying burnt metal and panic. The aisle carpet lifted slightly as the airflow reversed. Someone screamed. I stood. The straps of my dress uniform held me back for a second before I cleared them. The attendant turned toward me, eyes pleading. Please, can you help? I nodded. Show me the way. She led me through chaos. Drinks sloshed off carts. A child vomited quietly in an aisle seat. Passengers clung to overhead bins. The Nuggets man stumbled past, his daughter calling, Dad! But she did not dare move. I reached the cockpit door and knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. I stepped inside. The scene hit me like a wall. Warning horns blared. Panels glowed crimson. The captain slumped over controls, his oxygen mask dangling at an odd angle. The first officer was upright, but pressed against the sidewall, one hand on the yoke, the other clutching his throat. He looked up at me, fear flashing in his eyes. I can't clear it. The fire is spreading. Systems are fried. I moved to the secondary yoke. Stand back. He scrambled away. I pulled on the mask, clipped it to my harness. The captain twitched. I tapped his shoulder. You okay? He shook his head, eyes unfocused. The first officer pointed at the checklist printer. Engine out procedure. I grabbed the printout, skimmed code names, hydraulic bypass, manual gear deployment, alternate trim switch. My military training clicked in, each step rehearsed 1,000 times. Catherine stumbled in behind me, clutching the door frame. What are you doing here? I ignored her. I did not have time for family therapy. The plane banked left, altitude dropping. I could feel the nose dipping below the horizon. Instruments flashed warnings. Do something, Catherine whispered. Her tone had shifted from smug to desperate. I flipped the selector switch to manual hydraulics. The yoke stiffened. I braced myself, pressed forward gently, then eased back. The engine snarled in protest, but the bank lessened. I read altitude, 32,000 feet and falling fast. I keyed push to talk. Mayday, this is Codex on 14, engine 2 fire, captain incapacitated. Request priority vector to nearest diversion airfield. My voice cut through static. Silence, then crackle. Codex, this is Madrid Center. McLaren Airstrip is 150 miles southwest. Approved glide approach. Confirm altitude and heading. I repeated the numbers and switched channels. Catherine leaned close. Are we going to die? I turned to her. Not on my watch. She blinked. You're serious about this, aren't you? I did not indulge her. I returned to the controls. The first officer's face was pale. I offered him a nod. He stumbled out and helped the flight attendant secure loose items. I glanced down at the passengers through the cockpit door gap. They were a mess, pale faces, trembling hands, but they were still breathing. The plane was quieter now, the whining engines replaced by the hum of life support. It felt surreal. Rows of strangers trapped together by disaster. I adjusted trim manually, felt the cabin shift, checked heading, checked glide ratio. I visualized the runway, 9,000 feet of concrete in the middle of scrubland, no room for error. I tapped my thigh. Catherine watched with wide eyes. That was when she realized I was not a toy soldier. I was exactly what the captain needed. The plane shuddered again, this time like an animal testing its strength. I leaned into the yoke and held it steady. No second guessing, no theatrics, just action. The cockpit door slammed shut behind me as the plane hit another pocket of dead air. It dropped just enough to make stomachs jump, but I stayed locked in place. My hands were steady on the yoke. I did not blink. Who the hell are you? The first officer barked. Margaret Harrison, United States Air Force, currently retired, 6,800 flight hours, cleared for multi-engine military aircraft. He stared at me like I had just handed him a lifeline he was not sure he deserved. You're the one from seat 14? I nodded once. That's right, he exhaled. Thank God. He slid over. His hands were shaking. The smell of panic was thick. Sweat, ozone, whatever burned out in the panel behind us. The primary flight display was glitching. We had limited telemetry, one engine completely out, and a partially responsive hydraulic system. But I had flown worse in war zones. Still, commercial aircraft do not behave like fighter jets. They do not dive, flip, or claw their way through chaos. They lumber. They resist. Every move has to be calculated with margins so tight that mistakes become headlines. I worked fast, checking status indicators, switching backup systems, toggling fuel distribution. Most of it was muscle memory. Behind me, I could hear murmuring in the forward cabin, people asking what was happening, whispered prayers, and then that voice. She's not the pilot, Catherine said loudly to the flight attendant near the curtain. She's not certified for this. She's military. That's not the same. It's not even legal. And the attendant tried to quiet her, but she kept going. This is insane. You're trusting a woman with PTSD and a combat record to land a passenger jet. I did not respond. I kept working. She's not even a real pilot, Catherine said. She's a toy soldier playing dress-up. The first officer flinched. I could tell he was waiting to see how I would react. I did not give him the satisfaction. I locked in our altitude, adjusted trim, and confirmed the remaining engine was still stable. She saved our descent vector, he said finally, as if defending me. Without her, we would have dropped like a rock. That shut her up, at least for a moment. I clicked the intercom. This is Margaret Harrison, United States Air Force. I have assumed co-control of this aircraft. The captain is unresponsive. We are stabilizing and diverting to an alternate airfield. Stay calm and stay seated. The plane was quiet for the first time in 20 minutes. I glanced over at the first officer. You good? He nodded. Better now, but you'll need to fly it in. I don't trust the stick response. It's inconsistent. I took a breath. That meant the landing would be mine. The longer we stayed in the air, the more likely the fire in Engine 2 could destabilize the entire right side system, and the airfield we were headed to was not built for planes this size. The margin was razor thin. I adjusted heading and rechecked backup comms. Azor's center was still tracking us. I gave them altitude and expected ETA. They cleared a strip and confirmed rescue crews would be standing by. Cass, Catherine's voice suddenly close behind me. I turned slightly. She had pushed past the curtain and now stood just outside the cockpit door, arms crossed, eyes wide. You're really doing this? I looked at her for maybe a second too long. Yes, and I need you to get back to your seat. But the tone in my voice stopped her. She blinked like she did not recognize me. Maybe she did not. Maybe the sister she thought she could manipulate into silence had finally gone quiet for a reason. She did not speak again. She backed up slowly, then turned and walked away. I returned my focus to the controls. The aircraft was holding at 28,000 feet. Engine 1 was showing signs of pressure loss, but still stable for now. The cabin was calm, oxygen flowing, masks off. People were holding hands, crying quietly, clutching whatever faith they had left. I was not flying a jet. I was flying 300 lives held together by hope, steel, and whatever was left in that engine. The first thing I did was kill the autopilot. It was not doing much anyway. The system was bouncing between inputs, trying to compensate for engine loss with data that did not make sense anymore. We were flying wounded, barely, but still flying. The yoke pushed back like it was insulted, heavy, sluggish. Every movement had to be deliberate. The first officer sat beside me, fingers hovering over switches, eyes flicking to backup gauges every 2 seconds. His name tag said Stokes. He looked mid-30s, decent posture, zero poker face. I've got visual on the approach strip at McLaren Field, he said. Wind strong from the north, landing downhill. How short's the runway? 6,100 feet. Too short for a 777 with full fuel, unless we dump. Already in progress, cross feed open, fuel's bleeding slow through the right tank. He glanced at the gauge, did rough mental math, gave me a tight nod. You sure about this? Me neither. We did not need to say more. In the military, that is what trust looks like. Admitting the odds suck and doing the job anyway. I tilted us 2 degrees right, dropping into controlled descent toward Newfoundland airspace. Through the windshield, the coast looked like a dark gray smear under thick cloud. Not welcoming, but possible. Stokes cleared his throat. You want to brief the cabin? I glanced at him. They'll feel what's coming before they need to hear it. He cracked a smile. Barely, but it was there. We passed through 22,000 feet. The nose dropped too fast, so I eased back, compensating manually. The left engine groaned, more vibration than thrust. Not good, but not failure. Yet. The cockpit lights dimmed again, and I heard another relay click in the panel behind us. Auxiliary power transfer. The aircraft was stripping away anything it did not absolutely need just to keep us flying. You ever land a bird this size? Stokes asked, half curious. No, I said honestly, but I've landed fighters missing wings, power, and part of a tail. He grunted. Fair trade. I leveled us off at 14,000 feet, then banked east-northeast. McLaren was 37 miles out and barely visible on radar. I opened secondary comms and hailed their tower. McLaren Tower, this is Skybridge 3072. Aircraft is Boeing 777 with partial engine failure. Captain unresponsive. Alternate pilot in command. Request emergency landing clearance. There was a pause then. Skybridge 3072, this is McLaren, you are cleared. Emergency crews standing by. Winds variable 7 knots. Runway 17 is lit and cleared. Be advised, field length is not rated for your class of aircraft. Understood, we'll make it fit. Stokes blinked, then snorted. You always talk like that? I grinned. Only when I'm pretending I'm not freaking out. We started the approach. Speed 230 knots, altitude 10,500, fuel still too heavy but manageable. Cabin pressure holding, passengers silent. I imagined Catherine sitting in 14A, clutching her handbag like it had answers. Maybe wondering if I was going to kill us all. Maybe realizing I was her best shot at not ending up a headline. The runway came into sight, barely. A thin gray line cut through pine trees and fog, the kind of landing zone you would never aim for unless the alternative was worse. "Gear down," I called. Stokes hit the switch. The landing gear groaned, hesitated, then locked. I kept one hand on throttle, the other on yoke. Every tiny vibration told a story, and I listened to all of them. We dropped to 5,000 feet, still too fast. I eased back, power again, letting gravity do its job. The engines coughed and the plane wobbled, but it held. Stokes said quietly, "We might not stop in time." "We will." He did not argue. The windshield streaked with mist now. Ground proximity warnings pinged like anxious birds. The cockpit lit up with caution lights, none of which told us anything we did not already know. This bird was not meant to be here, but we were bringing it in anyway. As we crossed 1,500 feet, I glanced once at the dead captain, still slumped in his chair. Oxygen mask askew, face pale as parchment. Stokes caught my look. "I'll call it." "No," I said. "Let me." I adjusted trim again. The plane did not respond the way it should have. Too heavy, too slow to bleed altitude, too much drag, and one good engine working overtime. Stokes double-checked speed. "We're still hot." "I know. I'm trying to hold flare range without stalling." The ground rushed up now, way too close for comfort. The approach angle was ugly. We were barely clearing a line of fir trees that looked way too tall for a field this size. I tapped rudder and dipped us slightly left. The landing gear creaked. The stick vibrated in my hands. I have flown in combat zones with missile lock on my tail. I have made carrier landings in rain with half a cockpit. But this was different. There is no bailout option in a 777 full of civilians. No ejection seat, no do-overs. This was either going to work or become a crater on the evening news. "Flaps full," I said. Stokes flipped the switch. "We're losing lift." "Good. We need drag more than we need glide." The runway was in full view now. It looked like a driveway. Stokes was doing mental math out loud. "We need full reverse thrust and max braking the second we hit. We've got maybe 5 seconds of margin before we overshoot." "Noted." I reached for the PA and hit the switch. "This is the flight deck. Brace, repeat, brace for impact." Behind the cockpit, I could hear the ripple of movement as 300 people curled into crash position, belts pulled tighter. People clutched hands, whispered names, made promises no one would hear. Catherine's face flashed through my mind for half a second. I pictured her bracing against the seat, clutching her purse like it could buy her way out of gravity. Then I shut the thought down. We were below 800 feet. Stokes muttered, "Speed still high." "I'm aware." "Any ideas?" "One, terrifying." "Yeah?" "Do it." I pitched the nose slightly higher, riding the air like a stubborn wave. The wind shear bucked us hard, jolting the fuselage, but I kept the angle. The computer screamed at me, "Stall imminent." I ignored it. At 300 feet, I cut throttle on the live engine, full idle, no thrust. "You just killed the engine," Stokes said, alarm rising. "I just forced glide mode. If we flare too hard on power, we bounce. If we bounce, we lose roll control. If we lose roll control, we cartwheel." He stared. "You're insane." "Yep." The ground screamed toward us, altimeter ticking down like a bomb. 100 feet, whoosh, whoosh, steady. "Hold," I whispered. Wheels touched, slammed. The cabin jolted like we had hit a wall. The tail slammed down hard, but did not drag. The tires screamed. I pulled back hard on yoke while Stokes yanked reverse thrust toggles. One engine gave us drag. The other gave us smoke. Brakes kicked in, jerking us forward. We were eating runway like a starving dog. Trees at the end were getting too big, too close. Still doing 70 knots. "Still fast," Stokes shouted. "Keep it down," I snapped. I held yoke steady as the end of the runway loomed up fast. No shoulder, no extra pad, just gravel edge and a wall of trees. We were still doing 70 knots. I locked my jaw and kept the plane dead center. We hit a bump, left side dipped, right gear squealed. Then we slowed hard. Stokes hit brake assist, and the plane finally came to a full stop just feet before the edge. Silence. Pure electric silence. No more engine noise. No alarms. Just breathing. Lots of it. Heavy, unfiltered relief from 300 human lungs. Then the cabin erupted. Some sobbing, others shouting, but most just stunned like they had not processed what just happened. I looked over at Stokes. His face was white, hands trembling. He blinked twice, then laughed once, loud and sharp. "You actually did it." I did not answer. My hands were still gripping the controls. He reached out and gently peeled them off. Outside the windshield, emergency crews sprinted down the tarmac, lights flashing, fire suppression vehicles, EMTs, local law enforcement, a couple guys in reflective vests who looked like they had not expected to be part of any miracle today. I sat back and exhaled. Finally. Behind us, the cockpit door opened slowly. A flight attendant peeked in, face pale as hospital sheets. "Is it over?" "Landing's done. Rescue's yours." She nodded, tears streaming, then disappeared back into the cabin. Stokes gave me a sideways glance. "You ever consider commercial aviation?" I shook my head. Not dramatic enough. I pulled off the headset, finally aware of how loud everything had been. Inside the cockpit now, dead quiet, the kind that does not feel peaceful, just paused, like the whole world holding its breath, waiting to decide how it should feel. Then the first scream came from somewhere in the back, a sharp, high-pitched burst that did not sound like fear anymore. It sounded like release. More followed. Voices crying, cheering. Some clapped, others sobbed uncontrollably. One guy in row 6 stood up and shouted words I could not make out through the door, but the tone was unmistakable, gratitude mixed with disbelief. The cabin door opened again. Another flight attendant stepped in, shaking like she had just finished a marathon in a thunderstorm. She looked at me wide-eyed, then blinked several times as if trying to confirm I was real. You landed the plane." I nodded, still gripping the armrest, though we were stationary now. She looked stunned. Thank you. I don't think anyone even knows what just happened." "Good. They don't need to know yet." I stood, legs unsteady beneath me, and stepped into the cabin. Every head turned. Some people clapped instinctively, others looked confused, processing slowly. Catherine stood up slowly in 14A, her face unreadable. She looked around like someone had played a trick on her, and she had not figured out the punchline yet. "You?" Her voice came out louder than she intended, carrying across half the cabin. "You actually did it?" I did not stop walking. "Yes, I did." I checked passengers along the aisle. Some had cuts from flying luggage. Others just looked dazed, like their brains were still somewhere over the Atlantic. The man in the Nuggets hoodie made eye contact with me, then gave a slow, sincere nod. No words, just gratitude. The teenager beside him whispered something I could not hear, but she was still holding her father's hand, like she did not plan to let go anytime soon. I nodded back, then kept moving. We were still in a live emergency. No way to know if gear was damaged or if brakes were shot or if something else would fail before they got everyone off. Outside, fire trucks circled. One had already parked by the left wing. Men in yellow suits jogged out, unspooling hoses. The rear emergency door opened, a hiss of pressure, then air. Cold, damp Newfoundland air poured in. Passengers started moving slow and shaky. Crew guided them, trying to count heads, check for injuries, direct people down inflatable slides. Someone pulled out their phone and pointed it at me. I turned my head before they could hit record. The last thing I wanted was to be someone's viral hero of the week. Catherine caught up to me near the front galley, her heels clicking unevenly against metal flooring. "You had no right," her voice came out sharp, brittle. "You weren't even supposed to be in that cockpit. There are laws, protocols. There are also 300 people alive, which is more than you've ever saved from anything." Her mouth opened, then closed again. For once, she had no comeback. A little boy in a NASA t-shirt walked by, holding his mother's hand. He looked up at me and whispered something to his mom, who smiled despite the tears on her face. The boy turned back. "Are you a real pilot?" I crouched down to his level. "The realest kind." He gave me a thumbs up, so sincere it actually hurt a little. I helped a woman in her 70s shuffle toward the front exit. She kept mumbling something about her daughter and grandchildren. Her hands trembled, but she was smiling through wet eyes. By the time I stepped off the plane and hit tarmac, my legs felt like someone else's. Borrowed limbs. I looked back once, just once. The jet sat like a wounded animal, one engine still smoking, one wing dipped lower than it should have been. But it was upright, intact, full of people who were never supposed to walk away from this. A paramedic handed me a blanket. I did not need it, but I took it anyway. Habit. The field was chaos. Flashing lights, EMTs checking passengers, local media swarming past the security perimeter trying to get footage. Someone tried to shove a microphone in my face. I turned away. Catherine was not far behind. She stepped down the mobile stairs like she expected applause. None came. She walked over, fixing her hair with one hand, trying to reassemble her image piece by piece. "What are you going to do now?" Cold. Calculated. "Make sure everyone gets medical clearance. Then I'm getting on a call with Air Force Command." "Of course." She adjusted her dress. "Run back to your toys." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "You know what's funny? You called me a toy soldier, because that's what I am, right?" She crossed her arms. "Because you are. Then it's a hell of a thing that a toy just saved your life." She stared at me like I had slapped her. Then she turned and walked away without another word. I did not follow. The news van showed up before the adrenaline wore off. I was sitting on tarmac with the space blanket still wrapped around my shoulders when the first lens turned in my direction. They did not ask questions right away. They did not need to. The image was enough. Boots on concrete, hands still trembling slightly, hair windblown, eyes red from focus. Not tears. That did not stop headlines from writing themselves. I could already see the chyrons forming in my head. Mystery woman lands passenger jet. After captain collapses. Pilot in seat 14, who is she? Combat veteran pulls off impossible landing. I did not speak to anyone. Did not give a sound bite. Did not smile. I was still running checklists in my head. What could have gone worse? What did I miss? What did I not miss, but came too close to? A crew chief from the Canadian response team approached, his uniform crisp despite the chaos. "Ma'am, we're transporting passengers to a holding hangar for medical checks and statements. Can we get your info for incident reporting?" I handed over my military ID without a word. He glanced down, then up. "You really did land that thing?" I nodded. He gave a low whistle, then walked away shaking his head. Behind me, the 777 still sat like a bruised whale, tail heavy, listing slightly to one side, but in one piece. The right engine had melted clean through part of the nacelle. That alone should have taken us down. But it had not. Catherine passed by me without a glance. She was on her phone already, probably talking to a lawyer or PR firm. Her jacket was spotless, makeup still perfect, expression blank, like none of this had touched her. But it had. I had seen it in her eyes when the plane jolted the first time. She was afraid, not for the passengers, not for the crew, for herself. Several hours later, after statements and blood pressure checks and cold sandwiches and folding chairs, they let us all leave the field. I did not ask where they were taking us. A local hotel booked a last minute for stranded passengers. I finally checked my phone in the shuttle van. Missed calls, messages, emails, and one video link sent by someone I did not recognize. The clip had already gone viral. Someone had filmed Catherine during the flight, right after the intercom announcement when I took the cockpit. Her voice rang out clear as church bells on Sunday morning. "She's not even a real pilot. She's a toy soldier playing dress-up." The comments were not kind. Thousands of replies, all ripping her apart. People demanding her name, calling her a coward, a snob, worse. For the first time in 20 years, the world saw Catherine the way I always had, sharp, smug, and just a little too cruel. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling of the van. I did not feel proud, did not feel vindicated, just quiet. By morning, Air Force liaison officers had arrived at the hotel. So did corporate reps from the airline. They said a lot of words like protocol, liability, unprecedented situation. What they did not say was thank you, did not matter. I was not there for thanks. I was there to make sure no one spun this story into a disaster that did not happen. I gave my formal report in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Walked them through every second from engine loss to touchdown. They asked if I had been cleared to assume control. I was qualified. That wasn't the question. I didn't ask for permission. I saved lives. They wrote that down. The investigation started immediately. Not into the engine failure. That was expected. Machines fail, but into me. Into how I inserted myself, whether I was emotionally sound, whether I had violated any laws by taking command without airline authority. Catherine did not say a word during the entire debrief. She sat at the far end of the room, arms folded, legs crossed, jaw locked. I could feel her staring at me the whole time. When it ended, I walked past her without looking. She did not move. Outside, a small group of journalists waited behind barriers. One shouted a question I pretended not to hear. "Captain Harrison, are you a hero or a liability?" I kept walking, not because I did not have an answer, but because their question told me they had already made up their minds. 2 days after the landing, I was sitting in temporary Air Force housing near the base in Gander, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing my own statement when the official notice landed in my inbox. Subject: Incident Inquiry, Unauthorized Assumption of Flight Controls, Civilian Aircraft. Below it, a long string of agency names, half of which I had not heard from since officer school, FAA, NTSB, JAG. Even TSA had something to say. I closed the laptop slowly, set my mug down, exhaled through my nose. So this was how it was going to go. No medal, no handshake, no banner, just forms, hearings, and doubts dressed up like protocol. I was not surprised. This was not the first time a woman in uniform had done something extraordinary and been met with suspicion instead of respect, but it still hit harder than I wanted to admit. A knock on the door. A young Air Force lieutenant stepped in, nervous posture, clipboard, too many pens clipped to his pocket. "Captain Harrison?" "Yeah." "You're requested at the base conference room in 15 minutes. Air Mobility Command and FAA have joined the call. Legal team will be present." I stood. "Anyone from public affairs?" "Yes, ma'am, and someone from civilian relations. They want to talk about messaging." Of course they did. 15 minutes later, I was in a fluorescent-lit room with 5 people in uniform, 3 civilians in suits, and a video screen full of government faces who looked like they had never smiled in their lives. They asked questions for an hour. Why did I enter the cockpit? Did I know the captain was incapacitated? Had I received permission from the airline? Was I emotionally stable during the incident? Was there any history of PTSD, impulse issues, disciplinary flags? I answered everything directly, calmly, with no apologies. Yes, I entered the cockpit because the first officer requested assistance. Yes, I took control when he could no longer manage solo approach. No, I'm not commercial rated, but I am a decorated military pilot with over 6,800 flight hours and active duty flight clearance. One woman from FAA leaned forward. "Why didn't you wait for ground instruction? Why assume command without clearance from airline operations?" Because airline ops weren't on the plane, but 300 people were. They did not like that answer. Across the room, the Air Force liaison cleared his throat. "With respect, Captain Harrison's actions align with Article 5 of the Emergency Authority Clause under DPD, Field Directive 17A. In the absence of functioning chain of command, she responded under duty to protect life, property, and safety." The civilian in the gray blazer frowned. She still superseded airline authority. She also prevented catastrophic loss of life. The liaison's tone stayed flat, matter of fact. The room stayed quiet for a long time. After the call ended, a man from the airline's legal team approached me privately in the hallway. Mid-40s, expensive suit, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. "You've made us very nervous." I raised an eyebrow. "Nervous how?" "Lawsuits, headlines. There's footage of your sister insulting you mid-flight. It's viral." "I've seen it. She's a known figure. Big investment circles, high profile. A public scandal could cause damage to both sides." "You mean to her reputation?" He did not answer. Just gave a weak corporate smile. "We're hoping this can resolve quietly." It would not. Not anymore. By the next morning, 3 talk shows had picked up the story. The angle varied depending on which network you watched. Veteran hero saves flight after engine failure. Unqualified soldier hijacks plane midair. Pilot or liability. The Margaret Harrison dilemma. The last one stung. Not because it surprised me, but because it came with a panel of smug anchors dissecting my mental health like it was a spreadsheet. One said, "These military types carry a lot of baggage." Another replied, "Well, clearly she wanted the attention." Catherine did not give an interview. She did not need to. Her friends in finance were doing PR cleanup for her. Subtle leaks to the press, family drama behind cockpit chaos. Insider claims tension on plane stemmed from inheritance battle. They painted me like a ticking time bomb with daddy issues in a uniform. They did not mention 300 people still breathing because I refused to freeze. I was summoned back to give a second statement. This one focused on mental health screening, past trauma, emotional regulation under duress. The room was colder this time. Literally, someone had cranked the AC too high, and figuratively. The questions came sharper, more probing. They asked me if I had ever experienced hallucinations, combat flashbacks, intrusive thoughts. I stared at the wall for a moment, choosing words carefully. "No, but I have experienced watching a room full of people try to turn survival into scandal." They did not write that part down. After the meeting, I stepped outside alone, cold air, overcast sky, the kind of wind that cuts through uniforms and pride alike. Across the tarmac, I saw a little girl being helped into a van by her mother. She looked back at the plane, still parked where we left it days ago, then up at me. She waved, I waved back, not for her, for myself. To remind me I was still here. Still grounded, still standing. I sat across from my lawyer 3 days later, arms folded, the clip of Catherine mocking me looping silently on his laptop screen. The audio was crystal clear, even with the volume low. "She's not even a real pilot. She's a toy soldier playing dress-up." He let it play twice, then paused. "Maggie, they're trying to bury you with this." I leaned forward. "So dig deeper." He blinked. "Into what?" "Into everything. My records, her records, our father's will, the trusts, the company paperwork. She's not just trying to humiliate me. She's covering something." That word again. Covering. For years, I thought Catherine's cruelty was just emotional, passive-aggressive digs, backhanded praise, dismissive looks at holidays. But this was not pettiness. This was strategy. Start with the inheritance. Dad's estate went into a blind trust when he got sick, but I never saw disbursement records. My lawyer nodded, already typing notes into his tablet. 2 days later, I had documents in hand. Everything I suspected was true, and worse. Catherine had not just manipulated Dad's legal decisions in his final year. She had restructured the family holdings through a proxy firm buried under 6 shell companies, Carrick Trust Management. My name was removed, scrubbed, replaced with language that declared me mentally unstable, unfit to manage assets, and a risk to fiduciary continuity. I stared at the paper, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Where'd she get that language? My lawyer scrolled through his tablet. "Here's the kicker. This clause was added 4 years ago. Same month your Air Force file flagged that concussion from the G-Force incident during training." I blinked. That was minor. I passed all post-flight evals. She got hold of the unredacted medical report, spun it as evidence of psychological impairment, then used it to quietly remove you from decision-making power. I swallowed hard, tasting something bitter. Dad signed off on it? Technically, yes, but the notary's signature is fake. It was digitally stamped by someone no longer licensed in the state of Virginia. He slid the document toward me. It was all there in black and white. My own sister had used a training injury and forged documents to erase me from the family legacy and from Dad's final years. I remembered the phone calls she blocked, the hospice visits she said were not good for my image, the legal updates she swore did not concern me. She did not want me around because she had already erased me on paper. I closed the folder slowly, then looked at my lawyer. Can we take this public? We can do better. We can subpoena her. Back at my temporary quarters that night, I opened a secured laptop and pulled up my military case file. Attached to it, surveillance logs, emails, even contractor access logs for the Carrick Trust accounts. Turns out Catherine was not careful. One of the shell companies had routing data that bounced through a VPN badly. Whoever managed the system left metadata behind. One IP address traced back to an executive suite in Chicago, leased by Catherine's firm. She did not just steal control. She left a trail. I made copies, all of it. Printed 3 sets, encrypted 2 files, burned 1 to a hard drive locked in a safe I rented that same hour. The next morning, I walked into a federal investigator's office with a file the size of a brick. This is everything: financial manipulation, fraud, medical defamation, breach of fiduciary duty. The investigator, a woman in her early 50s with gray hair pulled back tight, did not blink. She just took the file and opened it, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. After a long silence, she looked up. "We've been waiting for this." I tilted my head. "Waiting? Your sister's firm has been on our radar for 18 months. Tax irregularities, suspicious trust transfers, but we couldn't crack the shell structure. You just handed us the key." News hit the following week. Catherine Harrison Blackwell, majority board member of Halberg Financial, was under federal review. Words like fraudulent inheritance maneuvering and strategic psychological discrediting made their way into mainstream press. For once, Catherine had nothing to say. At the same time, FAA and Department of Defense released a joint report on the flight incident. Conclusion: Captain Margaret Harrison acted within reasonable emergency authority. No violation of aviation law occurred. It was over. Officially. No charges, no censure, no apology either, but I never expected one. I was reinstated on active flight duty status, though I had already submitted my retirement papers years ago. The reinstatement was symbolic, a bureaucratic way of saying I had not done anything wrong, but something had changed in me. I was not angry anymore, not the way I used to be. I was focused. I requested a reassignment, advisory role, sole pilot mentorship, outreach for women in aviation. The Air Force granted it within a week. 2 days later, I got a letter, not an email, a real folded envelope with cream stock and blue ink, the kind people do not send anymore. It was from one of the passengers, a woman named Trish, mother of 3, seat 28D. She wrote, "My youngest had just turned 5. We were flying back from our first family vacation in years. If you hadn't taken that yoke, none of us would have made it. You didn't just land a plane. You saved a family." I put the letter on my desk and did not touch it for a long time. I did not cry. I just sat there and let the silence settle. Not the silence of trauma, but the silence of something over, something clean. I did not show up for the board meeting at Halberg Financial, but my presence was felt in every line of the report. The file was delivered to Halberg's general counsel at exactly 9 a.m., hard copy only, per protocol. Inside were copies of every document Catherine signed, edited, or concealed, every transaction routed through shell firms, every forged notary, and a summary affidavit from a forensic analyst confirming metadata links between her company and Carrick Trust Management. The board took exactly 11 minutes to call an emergency session. I was not there, but I did not need to be. People like Catherine do not fall with fireworks. They unravel in silence, under pressure, behind closed doors, when there is no audience to charm. By end of day, her name was gone from the executive page. By end of week, Halberg filed a motion to separate her assets from the primary trust, citing loss of confidence in internal governance. They did not call it fraud. They called it a reputational issue. That is how the powerful lose, quietly and without ceremony. Back at the base, I was clearing out my temporary locker when a young airman stopped me in the hallway. "Captain Harrison?" "Yeah?" "There's someone waiting for you in the office." "Civilian." I raised an eyebrow. "They give a name?" He nodded. "Catherine Harrison Blackwell." I thought about walking away, just leaving her there in that hallway, like she had done to me at Dad's hospice when she told staff I was too unstable to visit. But curiosity won. She stood in front of the bulletin board, arms folded, phone off for once. No entourage, no makeup team, just her. Raw, tired, exposed. She turned as I walked in. "I figured you'd be gone by now." "Not quite." "I heard you're taking the advisory post." "That's right." She nodded slowly, like she was processing information she did not want to accept. "That's good. You're good at training, focused, predictable, teachable." I said nothing. She glanced at the floor, then back up. "So this is what you wanted? Revenge?" That word hung in the air between us like smoke from an old fire. I walked past her, picked up my flight binder from the desk, slid it into my duffel, then zipped it shut with more force than necessary. When I turned around, I looked her dead in the eye. I wanted my name cleared, my father's trust restored, and 300 people alive. That's not revenge, that's responsibility. She flinched, just barely, but it was real. "You humiliated me." Her voice came out brittle and fragile in a way I had never heard before. "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence between us stretched and stretched, heavy with every unspoken decade of our lives. She reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. No name, no logo, just thick ivory paper, expensive weight. I did not open it. "Is this your version of an apology?" "It's a withdrawal from the estate, from the trust. I'm signing over my shares." I did not say thank you. I did not need to. "You'll do what you want with it," she added, voice flat. "I assume something noble." "You assume correctly." Catherine gave a tight smile, the kind people practice in boardrooms, the kind that never touches the eyes. "I'll be in Europe for a while, cleaning up the mess." I nodded. "Seems like a full-time job." She laughed, short, bitter, humorless, then almost involuntarily, like the words escaped before she could stop them. "I didn't think you'd land it." "I know." She stared at me for a long second, something unreadable flickering across her face. "I don't hate you. I'm not here for your forgiveness." She stepped past me. No handshake, no embrace, no final word. And that, I realized, was the apology. Not because she said it, but because she did not. 3 months later, I stood on a tarmac in Arizona, watching a dozen young women step out of a shuttle van. Their faces carried nervousness, excitement, curiosity all at once. They did not know they were my first class. The patch on their bags read, "Wind Flight Institute, Women in Air Leadership," funded entirely by my half of the estate. Each one had been selected from underrepresented communities, first-generation students, veterans transitioning to civilian careers, women who had been told no more times than they could count. One stepped up and extended her hand. Maya Patel, 52, former software and software engineer, always wanted to fly, but was told I was too old to start. I shook her hand firmly. "Welcome to the sky, Maya. Let me see what you've prepared." She smiled, genuine, hopeful, and pulled out a worn notebook filled with handwritten flight theory notes. The 3 months between landing that plane and opening this institute had been a blur. Legal battles, bank transfers, property acquisitions, contractor negotiations, hiring instructors, building curriculum. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the 12 women standing on my tarmac, waiting to become something the world told them they could not be. Torres, my lead instructor, former Navy pilot with 20 years under her belt, walked up beside me. They look green. They all start green. That's the point. She grinned. When do we start breaking them? Tomorrow at 0600. The hangars bore no family name but mine, not because I needed credit, but because I had earned the right to put something clean into the world that was not stained by Catherine's shadow, or Dad's complicated legacy, or courtrooms, or viral videos. Just a name, a direction, a promise. One of the girls stalled on her third takeoff 2 weeks into training. The nose pitched up too hard, and the trainer plane wobbled awkwardly above the tarmac, engine whining like it was begging for stability. I watched from the control tower, headset on, eyes narrowed against the morning glare. Cadet, ease your grip. You're flying it, not fighting it. There was a pause. Then her voice came back, tight and shaky. Copy that. She adjusted. The plane leveled. A second later, gear lifted off clean. And just like that, another one flew. Torres whistled low beside me. Think she'll stick with it? If she doesn't, it won't be because someone told her she couldn't. The Wind Flight Institute was 6 weeks into its first training rotation. 12 cadets, 10 of them had never touched a real yoke before this program. Now they were banking turns over the desert like they had been born in cockpits. The base was quiet at sunrise, my favorite time to walk it. Nothing but wind and propellers spinning up for drills. The desert air dry, clean. I liked the absence of noise, the lack of expectation. One morning, I was reviewing maintenance logs in the briefing room when the receptionist tapped my shoulder. There's someone here for you. I looked up, expecting a donor or recruiter, but instead, I saw a young woman, barely 23, 24 maybe, standing stiff in the doorway, arms at her sides, eyes flicking between pride and fear. She was holding an application packet. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I should just show up, but I didn't know who else to ask. I looked at the name on the folder, Sophie Blackwell. Catherine's daughter. She stepped forward before I could speak. I want to earn it, not because of my last name, not because of her, because I want to fly. I studied her for a long moment. Same cheekbones as Catherine, same stubborn chin, but the eyes, those were different, not entitled, not rehearsed. Just raw. What did your mom say about this? She said she wouldn't stop me. But she also wouldn't support me. Said if I came here, I'd be on my own. That true? Sophie's voice caught slightly. She cut me off 2 weeks ago. Why come here? She took a breath, steadying herself. Because you're the only person in this family who earned what they have. That stopped me cold. I walked to the desk and took her application, scanned it. GPA solid, recommendation letters clean, motivation statement honest, not polished by some consultant. She had the background, the drive, and the guts to walk in here alone. Orientation starts next week. If you make it through the first phase, you'll earn your wings, but no shortcuts. She smiled, too wide, too relieved. Wouldn't expect any. She turned to go, then hesitated at the door. You think she'll ever talk to me again? I considered the question carefully. I don't know, but I think you'll be okay even if she doesn't. She nodded once, then left. The ink bled a little on the corner of the page. Too much heat in the hangar that morning. Too little patience with pens that did not flow right. I turned to a fresh sheet in my flight journal and smoothed it out. Date. Instructor, Captain Margaret Harrison. Cadet, Sophie Blackwell. Lesson, crosswind landing, light turbulence sim. She did better than I expected. First time she banked too early, flared too hard. Second time she nailed it, calm hands, eyes sharp, feet where they belonged. After we landed, she looked over at me breathless. Was that decent? I shrugged, hiding the grin. Didn't kill us. That's always a win. She laughed, nervous but real. I watched her climb out of the cockpit, unzipping the flight suit like she finally believed she belonged in it. It hit me then how complete the circle had become. The name on her shoulder was not something she borrowed. It was something she earned. Back in the office, I sat at my desk, opened the flight log, stared at the blank section labeled Instructor Notes. I did not write anything for a moment, just sat with it. 1,000 things had been said about me in the past year. Pilot, hero, fraud, risk, sister, soldier, but none of them stuck the way that one word did in my own handwriting. Instructor. It did not need defending, did not need press coverage or courtrooms. It just needed hours in the air, sweat under pressure, and cadets who came back stronger after every mistake. I started writing. Cadet shows strong instincts under pressure. Still fights the yoke a little in crosswind, but adjusts quickly. Clear communicator. Learns fast, confident without arrogance. Shows restraint under critique. A winner, but not her mother's kind. I closed the journal and slid it onto the shelf beside the others. 12 logs now. 12 cycles of women stepping into cockpits they were told they would never touch. 12 rounds of proving skill beats legacy. I got up, stretched, walked outside. It was nearly dusk, the kind of light that makes the desert feel soft around the edges. A few cadets were packing up their gear near the tarmac. I saw Sophie among them, laughing with a girl from New Mexico and another from the Bronx. None of them looked like they belonged to the same world, except now they did. Later that night, I sat alone with a glass of water and the original black box transcript from the flight. I kept a copy for myself, not because I needed proof, but because I needed perspective. I played back a segment quietly, just ambient noise, a couple alarms, and my own voice cutting through static. We're going to glide it in. No power, no margin, just air and instinct. Even now, I could hear the calm under the tension. Not bravado, just choice. I paused the recording. People think revenge is loud. Fists on tables, speeches in courtrooms, enemies humiliated. But the deepest revenge is living well and knowing you no longer need their permission to do it. Catherine's voice used to echo in my head every time I stepped into a cockpit. Now it was just noise I did not listen to anymore. The Institute was quiet by midnight. I walked the strip one more time, checked the fuel trucks, touched the nose of the training plane Sophie flew earlier, same model I trained on back in Georgia decades ago, different call sign now. We named them after women who flew before us. This one was Stone, named after Major Gina Stone, the first woman I saw land a C-17 in a monsoon like it was a golf cart. She retired last year. Sent me a card when the Institute opened. Make them better than we were. We were trying. At the edge of the runway, I stopped and looked out. No planes in the air tonight, just the hum of wind across concrete and a low whistle through the fence posts. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the weathered patch from my original flight suit. Worn, frayed, nearly torn in half. I did not sew it onto anything new. I just held it. That patch had seen more than most people's marriages. It had been in war zones, simulators, hospitals, and most importantly, that one cockpit 40,000 feet above an ocean where no one thought I belonged. I folded the patch and placed it into a small box on the bench near the hangar door. Above it, a new plaque. Wind Flight Institute, founded by Captain Margaret Harrison. For every girl told she couldn't fly, you already know how to land. You were born to take off. There is a kind of victory that does not need an audience. It is not about taking someone down. It is about rising quietly and realizing you no longer care if they watch. For me, it was not about proving Catherine wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was never broken, never small, never just a toy soldier. In the end, I did not destroy my sister. I outgrew her. 6 months later, I was sitting at my desk when an envelope arrived. Cream stock, blue ink, handwriting I recognized immediately. I almost did not open it, but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, won out. The letter was short. Maggie, I won't apologize because I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know. Dad was proud of you. He told me every day, and I was jealous of you for that. You have something I never will, respect that's earned, not bought. Sophie is happier than I've ever seen her. You're teaching her what I couldn't. That self-worth comes from what you do, not what you own. Thank you for not letting me take that from her. Catherine. I folded the letter slowly, did not reply, just placed it in the drawer next to Dad's coin. Some things do not need words. That same week, I received 3 separate notifications that would change everything again. The first was a phone call from the Department of Defense. They were awarding me the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism, one of the highest honors a pilot can receive. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month in Washington. I almost declined. Almost. But then I thought about all the women in my program who needed to see that recognition matters, that what we do in the air, what we risk, what we save, deserves acknowledgement. So I accepted. The second was an official letter from the FAA. They were inviting me to join an advisory panel on emergency procedures and non-traditional pilot integration into commercial aviation. They wanted my expertise, my experience, my voice. A year ago, Catherine erased me from a will. Now the federal government was asking me to help rewrite aviation policy. I drafted a reply accepting the position within the hour. The third was a message from an unknown number. Captain Harrison, this is Daniel's mom. We were on the flight, seat 22C. Just wanted you to know he told his whole class today that he's going to be a pilot because of you. Thank you for giving him something to believe in. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Tell Daniel to work hard and stay curious. The sky will be waiting." The ceremony in Washington was smaller than I expected. No media circus, just a room full of officers, a few family members, Swanston, and a handful of passengers from the flight. The general pinning the medal spoke briefly. Captain Harrison exemplifies the highest standards of military aviation. Her actions under extreme duress saved 300 lives and demonstrated the kind of courage we hope to instill in every airman. We are honored to recognize her service today. Polite applause followed, but the moment that mattered came after. When a woman in her 60s approached me, I recognized her immediately. Trish, seat 28D, the one who sent the photo months ago. She was not alone. A teenage girl stood beside her, and a man I assumed was her husband. "Captain Harrison, this is my daughter Emma. She starts college next week, pre-med. She wants to be a trauma surgeon." Emma smiled shyly. "Mom told me what you did, how you stayed calm when everyone else was panicking. That's the kind of doctor I want to be." I looked at this girl, alive, healthy, full of dreams, and realized that was the real medal. Not the medal pinned to my chest, but the futures that continued because I refused to freeze. Work hard, trust your training, and when the moment comes, don't hesitate. Emma nodded seriously, like she was memorizing the words. Trish hugged me, tight, brief, then they left. I stood there in my dress uniform, surrounded by strangers in medals and ribbons, and felt something shift inside me. Not pride exactly, more like completion. A little boy in a suit, maybe 8 years old, approached next, same kid from the plane, the one with the NASA shirt. "My mom said you saved her." I crouched down. "What's your name?" "Daniel." "Well, Daniel, your mom was very brave that day. Everyone on that plane was." He looked at the medal on my chest with wide eyes. "Can I be a pilot when I grow up?" "You can be anything you work hard enough to become." He smiled, wide, gap-toothed, pure, and ran back to his mother, who was crying quietly near the wall. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I nodded. That night, I flew back to Arizona. The medal sat in my carry-on, wrapped in tissue paper. I did not take it out. Did not need to. When I landed, Sophie was waiting at the small regional airport. She had soloed that afternoon, her first flight alone. How'd it go? She grinned, still wearing her flight suit. I didn't crash. Best kind of solo. We drove back to the Institute together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. "I got another call from Mom today," Sophie said quietly, eyes on the road. I glanced at her but did not respond. She asked if she could visit, see the Institute, meet the other cadets. "What did you say?" I said I'd think about it. Sophie paused. Do you think I should let her come? I watched the desert roll by outside the window. Endless, open, unforgiving but beautiful in its own way. That's not my decision, but I will say this. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you, whether you're ready to carry that weight or let it go. Sophie nodded slowly, processing. We reached the institute as the last light bled from the horizon. Most of the cadets had already gone to their bunks. Only Torres remained, doing final equipment checks. How was DC? She called out. Shiny, she laughed. Figures. You coming to the night briefing tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. Inside my office, I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. 3 new emails, one from a journalist requesting an interview, one from a publisher asking if I'd consider writing a book, one from a women's aviation organization inviting me to keynote their annual conference. I marked all 3 as unread, decisions for another day. Instead, I pulled out the flight journal and made a new entry. Date, Cadet Sophie Blackwell, first solo flight, clean takeoff, steady climb, textbook landing, no hesitation, no fear, just flight. Recommendation, advance to phase 2. I closed the journal, leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, 58 years old, widowed, dismissed, erased from a will, mocked on a plane full of strangers. And now, founder of an aviation institute, mentor to 12 women, holder of a medal that meant something, advisor to the FAA, not because I fought for it, but because I refused to stay small. A knock on the door. Maya Patel leaned in. Captain, some of us are doing a night briefing on weather systems. Torres said you might join. Yeah, be right there. I stood, grabbed my jacket, followed her out. The briefing room was full. 12 women, ranging from 19 to 55, all seated, all listening as Torres went over pressure systems and wind patterns. I took a seat in the back, content to observe, but Sophie saw me and stood. Actually, before we continue, I think Captain Harrison should say something. She just got back from D.C. They gave her the Distinguished Flying Cross. All eyes turned to me. I had not planned to speak. But looking at their faces, eager, hopeful, determined, I realized they needed to hear it. I stood. I'm not great at speeches, but I'll say this. Every single one of you was told at some point that you couldn't, that you were too old, too female, too inexperienced, too something, and yet you're here. That alone makes you extraordinary. Flying is just the skill. The hard part, the part that matters, is showing up when the world expects you to quit. You've already done that. Everything else is just practice. Maya started clapping. The rest joined in. I sat back down, feeling warmth settle in my chest, not pride, but peace. After the briefing ended, I walked outside alone. The desert night was cool, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. I thought about Dad's note, the one I still carried in my wallet. Don't let anyone tell you that you are unworthy. He knew. Somehow he knew Catherine would try, and he left me that message as a shield. Better to leave as myself than stay as someone else's mistake. That line had been running through my head for months. Something another female pilot told me years ago when she left a toxic squadron. It applied here, too. I could have stayed invisible, could have accepted the erasure, could have let Catherine win, but I chose to leave that version of myself behind and become someone new, someone stronger, someone free. My phone buzzed, a text from Torres. Cadet Reyes just asked if we're really going to let her fly the twin engine next week. I said yes. You good with that? I typed back, she's earned it. Another buzz, this one from an unknown number. Captain Harrison, this is Trish. Emma wanted me to tell you she's already signed up for EMT training this semester. Said if you could stay calm at 40,000 feet, she can stay calm in an ER. Thank you for being her example. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. This, right here, was the victory Catherine never saw coming. Not courtrooms, not headlines, not public humiliation, just quiet lives built on purpose, on legacy, on women who would fly because I showed them it was possible, on a girl who would save lives in an ER because she saw me save lives in a cockpit. Ripples, endless ripples. I walked back to the hangar and pulled out the small box where I kept Dad's coin, the flight patch, and now Catherine's letter. 3 relics, 3 reminders, not of what I lost, but of what I became. I held the coin up to the light, worn smooth from Dad's years of carrying it, now worn smooth from mine. On one side, an eagle. On the other, words I had read 1,000 times, but never truly understood until now. Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. I used to think those were just Air Force values. Now I understood they were survival instructions. Integrity, refusing to be erased. Service, saving lives even when those lives mocked you. Excellence, building something that outlasts your pain. I placed the coin back in the box, closed the lid, locked it in the desk drawer. Tomorrow, another sunrise, another group of women learning to defy gravity, another chance to prove that age is just a number and that the sky does not care about your gender or your past or whether your family believed in you. The sky only cares if you can fly. And I could fly. At 58, widowed, dismissed, mocked, erased, I could still fly. More importantly, I could teach others to fly. That was not revenge. That was resurrection. I walked out of the hangar, locked the door behind me, stood on the tarmac under a blanket of stars, so thick they looked like spilled salt on black velvet. Somewhere out there, 300 people were living their lives, going to work, raising children, attending college, becoming doctors, because I took the yoke. Somewhere out there, Daniel was dreaming of cockpits. Emma was studying to save lives. Sophie was learning that her worth had nothing to do with her mother's money, and Catherine was learning that power built on cruelty crumbles faster than planes fall from the sky. I pulled out my phone one last time, opened the Notes app, typed a single line I had been thinking about for months. You are the strongest of us, not because you saved a plane, but because you saved yourself. Then I deleted it, because I did not need to write it down anymore. I already knew. I walked back to the small house I had bought on the edge of the airfield, made tea, sat on the porch, watched the last traces of color fade from the western horizon. My phone stayed silent. No reporters, no publishers, no requests, just quiet, just stars, just the hum of distant engines as a late commercial flight passed overhead, its passengers safe, its pilots trained, its systems functional. I raised my mug in a silent toast to that plane, to every person who ever sat in a cockpit and chose not to freeze. Then I went inside, locked the door, climbed into bed. Tomorrow the sky would be waiting, and so would I.